On the night before my son's wedding, I heard the words that split my heart in two. Jessica looked me straight in the eye and said, "After tomorrow, you're no longer part of this family." It wasn't shouted. It wasn't even said with anger. It was calm, like she'd rehearsed it. And that calmness hurt more than any scream ever could. I stood there in her backyard holding a scrapbook I'd spent weeks making, page after page of Daniel's childhood, from his first baseball game to his college graduation. The air smelled of roses and new paint. She'd had the entire place redecorated for the wedding. Fairy lights glowed in the trees. Everything looked perfect, except for that one sentence that burned through me like frost. For a moment, I didn't even understand what she meant. "What do you mean, Jessica?" I asked, my voice trembling but polite. "You're marrying my son. We'll all be one family tomorrow." She smiled, the kind of smile people give when they're pretending to be patient. "Oh, Margaret, you don't understand. Daniel and I are starting a new life. We need boundaries. It's nothing personal, really. But from now on, decisions about our home, our holidays, our future, they're ours, not yours. Not yours." The words echoed like an iron gate slamming shut. I'd been invisible before. When my first husband walked out, when I worked double shifts to pay for Daniel's education, when I stayed up nights worrying how to stretch $20 for groceries. But this was different. This was rejection dressed as elegance. I remember trying to keep my smile steady. My hands shook, so I clutched the scrapbook tighter. "I just wanted to give you something. It's for both of you," I said. "It's Daniel's story. Your story now, too." She didn't even look down at it. "That's sweet," she said, stepping back, "but we already have a photographer for tomorrow." I felt my face grow hot, like I'd been caught doing something embarrassing. I'd brought my heart in paper form, and she brushed it off like an unwanted flyer. For a few seconds, I just stood there, staring at her perfect hair, her perfect smile, her perfect confidence. And I thought, my son loves this woman. I turned to leave, still holding the scrapbook. Behind me, she added, "Oh, and Margaret, please don't wear that blue dress tomorrow. It's a little old-fashioned. We want everything to look fresh." That was the moment something inside me cracked. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was humiliation, the kind that seeps under your skin and makes you want to disappear. I managed to mumble something like, "Of course," and walked away before she could say anything else. The drive home was quiet. New York at night always hums, even in the suburbs, the low drone of cars, the flicker of neon signs. I didn't turn on the radio. My mind replayed every word, every smile, every dismissive glance. When I pulled into the driveway, the porch light was on. Robert was waiting for me, sitting in his old chair, a book in his lap. He looked up and smiled the way he always did when I came home late, but tonight I couldn't smile back. He stood up immediately. "What happened?" I tried to speak, but the words came out like glass. "She told me, after tomorrow, I'm not part of the family." Robert's eyes softened. He didn't ask questions, didn't demand details. He just took the scrapbook from my hands and set it on the table. Then he took my hands in his. Warm, steady, real. "Don't let her make you forget who you are," he said quietly. "A real family isn't defined by her words." I wanted to believe him, but in that moment all I could feel was small, smaller than I'd felt in years. I sat down at the kitchen table, the clock ticking loud in the silence. The scrapbook lay open. There was Daniel, 6 years old, grinning with a missing tooth. There he was, 17, holding his first car keys. There he was in his graduation robe, with me standing proudly beside him. How could I not be part of that family? I built it. I held it together when everything fell apart. Robert poured me a cup of tea. "You don't have to go tomorrow," he said. I looked up, startled. "But it's Daniel's wedding." "It's not your duty to walk into a room where you're unwelcome," he said. "Staying home isn't weakness, Margaret. It's dignity." Dignity. The word landed softly, but it stayed. For the rest of the night, I wandered the house, the creak of the stairs, the hum of the fridge, the faint wind outside. Every sound felt sharper, like the world had turned its back too. I sat by the window in Daniel's old room. His childhood posters were still on the wall. The bed was neatly made, just as I'd left it after he moved out. I imagined him tomorrow, standing at the altar, waiting for her. My heart twisted. Not from jealousy, but from something deeper. The fear that love could blind him to cruelty. I thought about calling him, just once, to tell him what she said. But then I remembered the look in his eyes whenever Jessica walked into the room. The look of a man who believed he'd found everything he ever wanted. So I stayed silent. Around midnight, Robert came in quietly. He didn't tell me to sleep. He just placed a blanket over my shoulders and sat beside me. "People like her," he said softly. "They mistake kindness for weakness. But truth has a way of showing itself. It always does." I nodded, though my throat ached. I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want justice. I just wanted peace. And maybe, someday, for Daniel to see me again not as an obstacle, but as the woman who never stopped loving him. When I finally went to bed, I didn't cry. I just lay there listening to Robert's slow breathing beside me. The world outside was quiet, but inside my heart, something had changed. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was there. A decision forming in the dark. Tomorrow I would not go to that wedding, not out of anger, not out of pride, but because sometimes the only way to protect your dignity is to walk away from people who can't see it. And maybe, just maybe, when the truth finally finds its way, they'll realize who truly held the family together all along. The morning of the wedding felt too quiet, like the world had taken a deep breath and decided not to exhale. I woke up before sunrise, the house still wrapped in the soft gray of dawn. Robert was already in the kitchen, making coffee. He looked at me with gentle eyes, as if he already knew the decision I'd made overnight. "Good morning," he said. I nodded and tried to smile, though my chest felt tight. "It doesn't feel like one," I whispered. The mug was warm in my hands, but I couldn't taste the coffee. My stomach felt heavy, like I'd swallowed a stone. Somewhere, miles away, flowers were being arranged, music rehearsed, and guests seated. I imagined the sound of laughter and chatter, the excitement in the air, and yet all I could feel was distance, like I was watching a movie about someone else's life. My phone buzzed on the table. Daniel's name lit up the screen. I froze. For a moment, I wanted to answer, but Robert's calm voice broke the silence. "You don't owe anyone an explanation," he said. "Not today." I stared at the phone until it stopped ringing. A message came through right after. "Mom, are you on your way?" I read it twice, my heart twisting. I wanted to tell him everything. What Jessica said, how it felt, how hard it was to stay home. But I also knew that if I told him now, it would only cause pain and confusion on his wedding day. So I put the phone down and whispered, "He'll understand someday." Robert reached across the table and took my hand. "Staying home isn't giving up, Margaret. It's self-respect." I tried to believe him, but there was a quiet ache building inside me, a mix of guilt and resentment. I resented that Jessica had put me in this position, that she'd made kindness feel like weakness. I resented that my son's big day had turned into a test of endurance. And I resented that I was the one who had to choose silence to keep peace. Around mid-morning, my sister Clara showed up at the door, wearing a floral dress and carrying a purse that looked far too bright for the mood I was in. She didn't even wait to sit down before saying, "You can't possibly be serious about missing the wedding, Margaret." I sighed. "Clara." "No," she interrupted. "You're his mother. People will notice you're not there. They'll talk." "Let them," Robert said calmly from his chair. "No one should wait in line to be humiliated." Clara turned to him, eyes wide. "Humiliated? What on earth are you talking about?" I looked down, unable to meet her gaze. "Jessica made it clear last night," I said quietly. "She doesn't want me there." There was a long pause. The ticking clock suddenly seemed louder. Clara's expression softened, but only a little. "You must have misunderstood her. She's under stress. Brides say things they don't mean." "No," I said, my voice steady now. "She meant it." Clara sighed and shook her head. "You're too sensitive. You always take things to heart." Her words stung more than I expected. Too sensitive. That was what people said when they wanted to dismiss your pain without looking at it. I'd spent my whole life being told that. When my first husband left, when money ran short, when people forgot the sacrifices I'd made. Robert stood and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Clara, this isn't about sensitivity. It's about respect, and Margaret deserves that." My sister opened her mouth to reply, then closed it again. She left not long after, muttering something about how the family would blame me. When the door closed behind her, I felt a strange calm. Robert poured another cup of coffee and handed it to me. "You did the right thing," he said simply. I nodded, though tears threatened to fall. "It doesn't feel like it." He smiled softly. "Doing the right thing rarely does at first." We sat in silence for a long time. Then around noon, my phone rang again. This time it wasn't Daniel. It was Clara. Her voice was breathless. "Margaret, are you sitting down?" My heart skipped. "What happened?" "The wedding," she said. "It's been called off." I froze. "What?" "I don't know all the details yet," she continued, "but something happened at the church. Daniel walked out before the ceremony even started." I couldn't speak. My hand shook as I lowered the phone. Robert's eyes met mine, calm and knowing. "See," he said softly, "the truth doesn't need noise. It always finds its way." I looked out the window. The world outside looked the same, the sun shining through the trees, a bird hopping across the lawn. But inside me, everything shifted. The resentment that had burned all morning began to cool, replaced by something quieter. A sense of justice I hadn't asked for but deeply felt. For the first time in a long while, I took a deep breath and didn't feel small. And in that quiet kitchen, surrounded by nothing more than sunlight and the scent of coffee, I realized Robert was right. Dignity doesn't come from being seen. It comes from knowing when to stay still and let the truth speak for itself. The next morning began with a strange kind of calm, the kind that follows a storm you didn't see coming. I sat at the kitchen table, still in my robe, staring at the folded newspaper Robert had left beside my tea. The headline wasn't about the wedding, not directly, but I could read between the lines. The words "wedding scandal" and "private affair exposed" were printed small, but to me they screamed. Robert stood by the window, sunlight brushing across his face. "It's all over, Margaret," he said quietly. "The truth came out yesterday." I wanted to ask how, but I already knew. The truth has a way of showing itself when you stop trying to protect those who don't deserve your silence. Clara had called earlier that morning, her voice full of half-whispered shock. Mark, the best man, had apparently walked into the church just before the ceremony with photos. Undeniable proof that Jessica had been unfaithful. Guests gasped. Daniel froze. And within minutes, the ceremony collapsed like a house built on paper. Jessica's parents tried to hush it up, but the guests saw everything. When Clara told me, I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I just sat there, holding the phone, realizing that sometimes justice doesn't feel like victory. It feels like relief. Robert folded the newspaper carefully and said, "See, the truth doesn't need noise. It always finds its way." But even as he said it, I could feel something heavy in my chest. Not guilt, but the strange ache of knowing I had seen this coming. From the very first moment Jessica looked at me with that polished smile, I had felt something was wrong. I'd wanted to believe love could change people. I'd wanted to believe Daniel's kindness could soften her edges. But love isn't always enough to fix deceit. As I sipped my tea, the phone rang again. This time it was Daniel. I hesitated before answering, my heart pounding. "Mom." His voice was quiet, broken. "Yes, sweetheart," I said, trying to sound steady. "She lied to me," he said. "Everything. The business deal with her father, the money, even the way she talked about you. She said you didn't support us, that you thought she wasn't good enough for me." My throat tightened. I wanted to cry, to tell him how deeply those words had cut me, how I'd stood in that backyard and swallowed my pride to protect his happiness. But instead, I said softly, "I'm sorry you had to find out this way." "I should have listened to you," he said. "I thought you were just being overprotective." For a moment, I didn't speak. I could hear his breathing, uneven and pained. It reminded me of when he was a little boy, trying to hide that he'd scraped his knee. Brave, but hurting all the same. "You loved her," I said finally. "There's no shame in that. But love can't live where there's deceit." He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quieter. "Can I come home?" That question hit me harder than I expected. For years, I dreamed of hearing it. Not because I wanted to keep him close forever, but because every mother hopes her child will find their way back when the world becomes too cruel. "Yes," I whispered, "always." When Daniel came home later that day, I saw a man who had aged overnight. His eyes were tired, his face pale. He hugged Robert first, maybe because he didn't trust himself to face me just yet. Then he turned to me and said, "I don't know how to fix this." "You start by resting," Robert said. "The rest will follow." That night, as rain tapped softly against the windows, Daniel sat in the living room, staring at the fire. I brought him a blanket, the same one he used to curl up in when he was a child. He said quietly, "She said she wanted a fresh start, just not with me, not with us." Something in me broke at those words. They were so close to what she'd told me that night before the wedding. The same cold dismissal, the same polished cruelty. It was like hearing my own pain echo through my son. "This reminded me," I said softly, "of the day your father left us. He didn't yell, he didn't slam the door. He just said he needed something new, and I believed him. I thought maybe I wasn't enough." Daniel looked up, surprised. I hadn't spoken of his father in years. "I spent years trying to earn a place I already deserved," I continued. "Don't make that same mistake. When someone treats you like you're disposable, you don't chase them. You let them go." He nodded slowly, tears in his eyes. And for the first time since that night in Jessica's backyard, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not resentment, but forgiveness. Not for her, but for myself. For all the times I'd stayed quiet when I should have spoken. For all the times I'd confused politeness with strength. Later that evening, after Daniel went to bed, Robert joined me on the porch. The rain had stopped and the air was cool and clean. "She won't stop here," he said. "People like her don't handle shame quietly." "I know," I said, "but this time I won't let her twist the story." That was the moment I made my choice. Quiet but firm. I wouldn't seek revenge in anger. I wouldn't fight with words or tears. Instead, I would stand tall, and when the time came, I would let the truth speak in my stead. Robert turned to me, his hand warm against mine. "You've always had a strong heart, Margaret," he said. "Now it's time you used it for yourself." I looked out into the night. The rain had washed everything clean. The porch steps, the garden path, even the old oak tree that had stood through every season of our lives. For the first time in a long while, I felt calm. The storm had come and gone, and though it had left its mark, I was still standing. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the quiet, I could sense that this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something new, something stronger. Because sometimes revenge doesn't start with rage. It starts with silence, with dignity, and with the decision to finally stop giving your peace away. The peace after the wedding didn't last long. Within a week, the silence was broken by whispers. the kind that travel fast in small towns and grow sharper with every retelling. People were saying I had ruined my son's wedding, that I had spread rumors, that I'd embarrassed the bride in front of everyone. At first, I thought it was nonsense, just gossip that would fade. But then I saw the posts online, photos of Jessica in her white dress, captions calling her the victim of a jealous mother-in-law. My name wasn't written directly, but everyone knew who they meant. I stared at the screen, my stomach turning. The comments were worse. Strangers judging me, saying I couldn't let go of my son, that I wanted attention. I'd lived through humiliation before, but this time, it felt different. It wasn't whispered behind closed doors. It was public, out in the open for everyone to see. Robert walked in just as I put the phone down. He took one look at my face and didn't need to ask what happened. "They're trying to rewrite the story," he said calmly. "They lie because they're afraid. Fear is the first sign of defeat." I wanted to believe him, but the sting of betrayal still burned. Jessica wasn't just defending herself. She was trying to destroy me. And the cruelest part was that she was doing it with charm. The same charm that had fooled everyone before. Her family joined in too, posting smiling photos, pretending nothing had happened, while quietly sending out whispers that we had sabotaged the marriage out of jealousy. A few days later, a thick envelope arrived in the mail. Inside were legal papers, a lawsuit from Jessica's family, accusing us of defamation and intentional harm. My hands shook as I read through the pages. Robert took the envelope, scanning the words with quiet focus. "This is intimidation," he said. "They're bluffing." I felt my throat tighten. "But they're saying we ruined her reputation." "She ruined her own reputation," Robert said firmly, "and we can prove it." That's when we called Linda, an old friend and lawyer who had known our family for years. When she arrived that evening, she listened carefully as we told her everything. The prenup Jessica's family had tried to force on Daniel, the fake accounts, the financial games behind their company's name. Linda leaned back in her chair. "If what you're saying is true," she said, "they've been using your son as a financial cover. We'll need evidence, messages, documents, anything that proves intent." For the next week, our dining table turned into a small war room. Robert combed through bank statements, Daniel brought in old emails, and Linda organized everything into folders. Each new discovery felt like peeling back another layer of deceit. We found hidden clauses in the prenuptial agreement that would have given Jessica's family access to Daniel's income. We found transfers between their business accounts and his savings. As I held one of the documents, I felt both anger and sadness wash over me. All those nights I had stayed up worrying about whether I'd done enough as a mother. And meanwhile, others had planned to take advantage of the one thing I'd worked my whole life to protect. Jessica didn't reach out directly, but she didn't have to. Her messages came through others. Mutual friends, social posts, little hints that she was the one who had been wronged. Every time someone mentioned her name, I felt that same cold humiliation return. The woman who had told me I wasn't part of the family was now painting herself as the innocent one, while I became the villain in her story. But through it all, Robert stayed steady. "We're not going to fight her with anger," he said one evening as he looked over the final folder of evidence. "We'll fight her with truth." There was something about the way he said it, calm but final, that settled the storm inside me. I realized that revenge didn't need to be loud. It didn't need to be cruel. It just needed to be right. When Linda came by again to review everything, she smiled for the first time in days. "You've built a solid case," she said. "If they keep pushing, this could end very badly for them." As she left, I watched the sun setting through the kitchen window, golden light falling across the table piled with papers. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't scared. I was ready. Jessica and her family had built their image on lies, but the truth was finally in our hands. And as I stood there beside Robert, I understood what he had meant all along. Fear makes people desperate, and desperate people always reveal themselves in the end. The night of the dinner felt heavier than any I could remember. Robert and I sat side by side in the car, watching the lights of the hotel shimmer through the rain. It was the same hotel Jessica's family had chosen for what they called a peace dinner. The invitation had come through Daniel, a message from Jessica's mother asking to talk things out and end this with grace. I almost laughed when I read it. Grace had never been their goal. Still, we went, not out of revenge, but to end the silence. Sometimes truth needs a room full of people to finally stand tall. When we entered the dining hall, all eyes turned. Jessica sat at the far end of the table, wearing a pale blue dress, her posture perfect, her expression polite. Her parents flanked her like guards, all smiles for the watching guests. The scene looked rehearsed, as if they were hosting an awards dinner, not a reckoning. "Margaret, Robert," her mother said, rising to greet us. "I'm so glad you came. We've all been through so much. Let's put this unpleasantness behind us." I smiled, though my pulse quickened. "That depends on what you call unpleasantness," I replied. Jessica's father gestured for us to sit. "We'd like to clear the air," he said. "We've heard some unfortunate things about a certain document that's been misunderstood." Robert placed a slim folder on the table. "Nothing was misunderstood," he said evenly. "You asked my son to sign away 75% of his income to your accounts. That's not love. That's theft dressed as tradition." A hush fell over the table. Jessica's smile faltered for the first time. "You're twisting it," she said quickly. "It was just a protection clause. Every modern couple has one." I looked at her, really looked. The confidence, the poise, the careful mask she wore. "A protection clause for who?" I asked quietly. "Because it wasn't protecting Daniel." Her father leaned forward, voice firm. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Our family has a reputation. You wouldn't understand the business world." For a moment, the old anger rose in me. The same humiliation I'd felt that night in her backyard. The same sting of being spoken to as though my years, my work, my sacrifices meant nothing. I took a breath, steadying myself. "You're right," I said softly. "I'm not from your world. I'm from the one that taught me to work for everything I have, the one that taught me that family isn't a transaction." Robert opened the folder and spread the documents across the table. Copies of emails, the prenup, and records that Linda had helped us uncover. The paper trail was clear, undeniable. "This is your reputation," Robert said calmly, "in your own words." Jessica's mother gasped, reaching for the papers. "You can't use these." "They're public now," I said, my voice steady. "We've already shared them with the press. The truth deserves light." It was strange how quiet the room became. No shouting, no grand scene, just silence, the kind that follows when pretense collapses. Jessica stood up, her face pale. "You think you've won?" she said bitterly. "You've ruined everything." I looked at her. This woman who had once held my son's future in her hands. "No," I said. "You did that yourself." We left before dessert was served. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean. Robert squeezed my hand as we walked to the car. "It's over," he said. I nodded, but deep inside, I knew it wasn't about victory. It was about closure, about reclaiming the dignity that had been stripped away one cruel word at a time. A few days later, a journalist called. The article ran the next morning, front page of the local paper, followed by stories online. Jessica's family's business dealings were exposed. The lawsuit was dropped quietly, and the posts about me disappeared just as quickly as they had appeared. That evening, Daniel sat with us on the porch. The sky was soft and orange, the air calm after a long storm. He looked at us both, eyes full of something I hadn't seen in a long time. Peace. "You were always my family," he said. "Both of you." Robert smiled and took my hand. We made it. Together. I looked out at the horizon where the sun dipped below the trees and felt the quiet settle in my chest. The noise, the lies, the humiliation, all of it had faded, leaving only the steady warmth of truth. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of being forgotten. I wasn't invisible. I was free, because I finally understood something I'd spent a lifetime learning. You don't have to deserve love. You just have to stop apologizing for being the one who gave it. If you've ever been made to feel like you don't belong, you're not alone.